G'day everyone and welcome to Brushes with Beck. In today's video I just wanted to share with you this little piece I did with watercolour pencils of a superb fairywren. Now for this piece I have used my faber-castell Albrecht Durer Watercolour Pencils that I received for Christmas. I am still practicing with these pencils and learning how to use them, so my techniques may not be very good, but I like to play with them sometimes just to do quick little pieces, little colour studies and value studies, and just to practice drawing and painting birds, I suppose. So I'm using a pretty cheap piece of watercolour paper here and going on pretty heavy with some of those colours on that branch there, and way too heavy with my first bit of water on the brush and just getting that branch in first. Originally I was going to include also a green background behind, but I wanted my bird to stand out really well, and I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to make the bird pop properly with the watercolour pencil background, since I'm sort of a bit hesitant to go really strong with watercolour pencils. I just need to get some more practice in. So with the branch, because this cheap paper doesn't take many layers as well in terms of wetting the paper, colouring back over, wetting it again, it tends to ruin the surface of the paper a bit. I used as much colour as possible on that first application, using multiple colours to get that colour of the branch, and blended that together with the water rather than doing one colour at a time. So I do that a little bit through the piece, although sometimes I do just use the one colour to work with. But you can use watercolour pencils either way. You can either blend them dry on the paper and then use the water to blend them together, or you can use each colour individually and let it dry between colours. So it's actually, there's wide variety of techniques to use with watercolour pencils. As I said, I'm still learning them, so I'm not very good at it, and what you see is just me playing around and experimenting and seeing what I can achieve with them. So I really enjoyed doing this little fairywren because there's a lot of different textures and colours in this piece. I didn't want to just be doing another brown bird or a brown animal, and I didn't really feel like dealing with fur, to be honest. Today I've been drawing a lot of fur recently, and so I thought a little bird on the branch. And also I love birds, if you couldn't tell from if you've watched any of my previous videos, I do draw a lot of birds. So this little fairywren was a good option with a bit of a pop of colour there with those blues. So with watercolour, either watercolour pencils or just plain watercolour paint, you are supposed to work from light to dark, preserve your white areas as the paper, and then work in your lightest colours and work in your darks over the top of those light colours. Now, I'm not always very good at that. I don't like to lose the definition of my line work, and I like to know where my dark and light values are as I work through a piece. I really struggle to lay in an entire wash of a light colour in, because I feel like I'm losing some of that sense of place and some of that definition, and I struggle to work that way. So I kind of tend to put in some darker areas alongside the lighter areas, and then I go back in and strengthen up the darks after that. So it's a little bit of a different process to how you're probably supposed to work with watercolours, so keep that in mind if you are watching my video for how you should work with watercolours, because the way I do it is just the way I feel I have to do it, and not the way that you probably really should be working. You really should work in with those lighter colours first, and then do your darks progressively over the top and slowly darken up your image with multiple layers, as you would with any colour pencil drawing on a paper that didn't accept light over dark, like a hot pressed watercolour paper. You're always working with those lighter areas first. Just waiting for some areas on the bird to dry. I'm going back in to the branch there and adding some warm grey 5 over the top, I think that was, just to sort of tone down the rich brown colour a little bit. I didn't want it to be really vibrant brown, so I just tried to tone that down with some of the warm grey. before going back into my bird. And it's really important to remember with watercolor pencils is it's so important to let your paper dry properly before adding more color pencil on top, because you will completely destroy the surface of the paper if that paper has not dried properly first. So for the moment, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. I do also find with these watercolor papers, or at least with this cheaper stuff, that with the watercolor pencils, once you've got some layers down of the pencils and you've wet the paper, I find that a slightly blunt pencil doesn't take to the paper very well, and you have to apply a lot more pressure to apply that pencil down. So it's really important after that first layer of color going down that you keep your pencils nice and sharp if you're trying to do a richly colored area, because it will really help you apply that color much more easily. And a blunt pencil over the top of a previously wet area is really going to struggle to lay down color on that paper. I hope I've said that in a way that makes sense to you guys. It makes sense in my head, but getting the words out doesn't always make sense. But I hope you understand what I mean when I'm saying let your paper fully dry before adding another layer of the watercolor pencil, and make sure your watercolor pencil is sharp when you're adding an additional layer over the top of an area that you've wet and let to dry to help preserve that paper tooth and the surface of the paper. So it's starting to add in some details across the back of the head. You can see I've added quite a lot of detail on the wing there. And it's, as before, in terms of putting your lights down and going in with your darks over the top, it's also really important to save all that detail for the very, very last part that you do on your image. If you put in detail too early and you realize, oh, I needed to do a wash of blue over that or something, you're going to lose all that detail. So make sure that you are 100% final with the colors that you have down before you add in those fine little details over the top, because otherwise it makes it really, really tricky to work around. You may have to brush it all out with the paintbrush and some water and then re-add in that detail again afterwards, and it might not quite turn out the same. So my little fairy wren has progressed along pretty well. I was a little bit daunted at first, but I love the little hints of blue in the pale feathers and the slight little details and the blue and the different shades of blue that I've managed to achieve on the head, because the blue on the cap, the cheek and the back of the neck is actually the same color on these little birds, but when they catch the light from different angles they can look almost white or a more vivid blue, and it really changes the way that color looks. So I really wanted to capture that in this piece, and I'm glad I have. So just fixing up the eye there and making sure that's all blocked in nicely. Still a few little bits and pieces to go. Making sure I remember to add color to that beak and don't leave it plain. Sometimes I finish a piece and then I look at it afterwards and go, oh, I completely missed that one little section, because sometimes I leave something intending to go back to it and then I forget to go back to it. So it's important to double check your piece before you really finish it. Sometimes it helps to step away for a bit and then come back, and then you can see what you may have missed or things that you may want to change. I find that really helpful, just to take a step back for even just a half an hour and come back to it with the fresh eyes, and it can make it really easy to see things that you missed before. Now you see there for the beak, I did actually add pencil down onto the wet paper. I said not to do this before. You can do it, but only for really, really small areas. Like I just wanted to add a little dab of black onto the beak there, and I didn't press very hard at all. It was very gentle, just to apply a rich line of black for the nostril there to make that a nice rich color. But there you have it, the finished piece. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I apologize that I'm not very thorough with technique for watercolor pencils, because as I said, I am still learning them myself and developing my skills for that. But I do hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, leave a comment down below if you did, subscribe to my channel, and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week for another video. Stay creative!